let's get Bootstrap. So let's get Bootstrap so we can add the grid. Let's copy that. Let's add it to our index. I guess not. All right. So let's add Bootstrap. So this would be link href and then rel style sheet. We had decided to break out certain components into dedicated directories, right, depending on their role, right, in the application, right. As managers, containers provide data and event handlers for child components, whereas the components are strictly just rendering content and are not handling they're not handling state and event handling for child components. Now, some components might be handling state for themselves. If they're, for instance, you might have in a row of a table row, you might decide that each row should be its own components. If it's maintaining state on its own, then it's still a component. If it doesn't provide state and event handling for child elements, it's not a container. Right? It might be stateful. It might have event handlers for its own purposes, but it's not providing. It doesn't have side effects to in any of its children. So it's not a container, even if it might be stateful. So notice that here we have the editor for the course editor and the module list. Presumably, you would also have tabs and topics, right? And it might make sense that after you have 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 files that implement the editor, it might make sense to create its own directory, and call it the course editor, and then drag in there the dozen of files that implement the course editor. Right? Again, to manage the complexity. Right? So you can say, well, everything that is course editor is under that directory, right? And everything that is the grid component is somewhere else, right? So in the course editor, we can go a little further. For instance, we might first decide that we might break out each one of these, right? So this might be another component that might contain the lesson tabs. And in that lesson tabs, I can move this in there. And then wrap it inside of a reusable component, const lesson tabs, that can take as argument the lessons. And then I would obviously iterate over the lessons. I would iterate over the lessons, which I'm not going to do. And we export default lesson tabs. And then I can have here the lesson tabs. And same thing for the topics. We can remove that from here and then create a separate component called topic pills, right? And paste that in there, and then wrap it inside of a reusable component, const topic pills. Okay, and then we export, right? And then bring it in here. Now the course editor starts to become more manageable, right? We had way too much stuff in here, right? And we broke it out, right? Now I can just focus. The course editor can focus on just laying out this content, right? So that instead of rendering from top to bottom, I can say, oh well, these are supposed to render actually in a row that contains 2 columns. We have the left column that is size 4, right? And another column right next to it, which is size 8. And then we can move the module list onto the first column, and then the lesson and tabs and the topics to the other column, right? And starts being rendered. There it is. So we have on the left-hand side the list of modules, and then the lessons and the topics on the right, obviously rendered as tabs, rendered as pills. That's just more CSS, right? But at least we can think of it, independently as one thing, as one component. Again, the layers of abstraction.